The financials for Bellatores aren't looking great, and it's making me feel extremely nervous for how this game is going to turn out. This is a game that's been in development for over a decade, a game I've been genuinely excited about, and right now, the studio is kind of fighting to survive. Today, we're covering the full picture, the beta concerns, what the devs have actually committed to fixing, and whether Bellatores has any realistic chance of actually making it to the West. Before we get into everything that's going on, I want to make sure we're all on the same page, because if you haven't seen any of my earlier videos, the drama sort of means nothing without the context. Bellatores is a medieval fantasy MMORPG being developed by a Korean studio called Nyou, and on paper, it sits in a space that MMO players have been chasing for years, the proper sandbox. Not a theme park MMO where you follow a quest marker, get handed gear, and run the same dungeon loop for 6 months. A sandbox, one where players drive the economy, players shape the world, and the systems underneath everything actually have to work together to make it feel alive. We're talking territory control, open world PvP, a player-driven economy, deep crafting, and a design philosophy where, in theory, whether you're a hunter, a trader, a crafter, or a fighter, you have a meaningful place in the world. Not as a side activity, but as a genuine playstyle. That's a big promise, because we've seen it before. New World launched with enormous hype and a real economy, and it fell apart because the systems weren't really balanced well enough to sustain it. Albion Online got it largely right, but it's an acquired taste. Black Desert has incredible depth, but a monetization model that, well, we don't really need to get into that. The point is, a sandbox MMO done well is one of the hardest things to build in this genre, and players are genuinely hungry for someone to actually pull it off. Bellatores looks like it can be that game. It's been in development for over a decade, which either tells you the studio really cares about getting it right, or that something has gone seriously wrong along the way. Probably a bit of both, if we're being honest. So that's why I've been paying attention, that's why I've been covering it, and that's exactly why I'm telling you this kind of stings a little. So the Korean closed beta happened, community feedback came in, and I've been sitting with all of it. I want to talk you through some of my main concerns, not to doom and gloom, but because these are the things that will genuinely make or break the game. Monetization is my biggest concern. We still don't know what the model looks like. And for a sandbox MMO, that is not a minor detail, it's everything. Because if progression or the economy can be influenced by spending, the entire system collapses. The economy is the game in a sandbox. You corrupt that, you lose the whole thing. My gut says free to play, maybe with a box price. Korean studios rarely go subscription based, and I honestly don't think a subscription serves a player base anyway. It's too high a barrier to entry, but free to play brings its own problems. Cosmetics, fine, we've all made peace with cosmetics. But the moment you see convenience boosts in a game where resource gathering is supposed to matter, increased weight limit, better drop rates, XP boosters, that's when the foundation cracks. And if they introduce any kind of purchasable currency that bleeds into the player economy, no WoW token, no Guild Wars 2 gem situation, because that cannot exist here. A sandbox MMO lives or dies on its economy being player driven, not wallet driven. Here's the thing about combat as well. It's the aspect that will make or break this game above everything else. Doesn't matter how deep the crafting is, doesn't matter how good the economy is. If the combat doesn't feel good to play, players won't stick around long enough to engage with any of it. The beta flagged stiffness. The devs acknowledged it and committed to fixing it. Good, but I do want to see more smoother transitions. Movement should come with abilities. There are plenty of MMOs that do this brilliantly, so there's honestly no real excuse for combat that feels static or weightless. And weapon-based classes are a divisive design choice, so they need to make sure two players running the same weapon don't just feel like the same character. If I pick up a sword and shield, and you pick up a sword and shield, I want our builds to feel genuinely different if we choose different skills. A DPS iteration, a support iteration, crowd control, player choice has to feel meaningful even within the same weapon archetype. Because if the meta just collapses everyone into one or two optimal setups, the build diversity promise disappears overnight. Now lastly, the sandbox execution, that's probably the hardest of all. Sandbox MMOs are brutally difficult to build because everything has to work together seamlessly. The economy, the combat, the progression, the social systems. If any one breaks, the whole thing starts to unravel. And what holds it all together is whether the world actually feels alive. Here's the thing with player freedom. When it works, it's incredible. When it doesn't, the world kind of feels hollow. And a hollow feeling sandbox is actually worse than a bad story in a theme park MMO. Because at least in a theme park, you're given a path. Freedom without a living world is just emptiness. The devs have talked about every activity, hunting, gathering, crafting, trading, offering meaningful rewards and a sense of purpose. And I love that vision, but I want to know what it means in practice. Is it just golden experience? Because that's kind of not enough. I would love dedicated progression trees tied to life skills. Leveling your weaponsmithing unlocks recipes nobody else can craft. A hunting progression system that allows you to track specific creatures for rare resources. What does trading actually look like? Trade packs, caravans, loading up a mount? We've seen skill trees. I want that same depth applied to everything outside of combat. We haven't seen how all of these pieces come together at scale yet, and until we do that, the question mark remains open. So to be fair to the developers, they did respond to beta feedback, and it's not nothing. They came out with a detailed update acknowledging the combat issues directly. They're working on reducing animation lock, improving weapon switching, rebalancing weapon damage, and speed. They called out hit feedback as something that needs to feel more impactful. Agreed. On crafting, they said they're lowering the entry barrier and reducing how much the mastery system gates people out, which is exactly what needed to happen. Story and optimization are being expanded too. And let's be real, if the game looks great but runs terrible, it's dead. Now all of that is a meaningful list. If they can deliver on it, the game looks a lot better than it did in the last beta. Here's the catch, all of this does take time. The Russian community, which has been one of the more active external testing groups, just got told their second beta is delayed. The official statement says the delay is to implement these large-scale changes across combat, crafting, story, and optimization before testing resumes. The new window for the Russian closed beta test 2 is now Q2 of 2026. And look, I'd rather they delay it and get it right, but it does raise a bigger question about the picture outside of game development, because some news actually came out recently that sort of changes the tone of this conversation significantly. And also, Q2 is almost over and we haven't seen it yet. What does that mean for the state of the game? So this is where things unfortunately get a bit heavier, because outside of patch notes and beta delays, some financial reporting has emerged about NYOU, the studio behind Bellatores, and it's not comfortable reading. According to a Korean financial report from April this year, NYOU has allegedly failed to pay wages to around 100 employees. Roughly 2.45 billion Korean won in unpaid wages. That's somewhere in the range of 1.7 to 1.8 million US dollars. The South Korean Ministry of Employment and Labor apparently flagged the company publicly. And when you look at the wider financials, as of 2023, NYOU had around 1.9 billion won in liquid assets against debts of around 11.2 billion won. Their accumulated losses grew by over 40% between 2022 and 2023. And they have major institutional investors, including the Korean Development Bank and Tencent affiliated funds, with maturities coming due in September and October this year. So let's be clear about what this picture looks like. A studio that's been in development for over a decade, hasn't shipped the game, is struggling to pay staff, and has investor deadlines arriving in a few months, all while trying to simultaneously overhaul their core systems. That's pressure from every direction at once. And beyond the financials, employee reviews of the company have surfaced describing poor communication, low morale, and a genuine sense of uncertainty about the company's direction. That's the kind of internal environment that doesn't speed up development. I want to be absolutely clear though, I'm not here to bury Bellatores. I genuinely want this game to exist, and I want it to be good, but it would be doing you guys a disservice not to lay it out plainly. You deserve a full picture. That's the kind of coverage this channel is built on. If you want to stay up to date as everything develops, subscribe. I'll be here every time something moves on from this. So where does this leave us? Honestly, uncertain, but not hopeless. The devs have shown they're listening. The list of improvements they're committed to is meaningful. Russian closed beta test 2 is still on the calendar for mid-2026. They've signed a publishing deal in Taiwan earlier this year. There's still some commercial momentum there. And a Western release, while never officially confirmed with a hard date, hasn't been ruled out either. Don't know how the financial situation resolves as those investor deadlines hit later this year. And a lot is riding on whether the closed beta test 2 actually delivers something the community feels good about. But I'm still watching this one, easily. Because if they pull it off, if they fix the combat, nail the crafting loop, sort out their monetization, and get this thing to launch in a state actually delivers on the sandbox MMORPG promise, that's a game I want to be playing and talking about with you for a long time. Drop a comment below. Are you still holding out hope for Bellatores, or have the red flags put you off? I genuinely want to know where you're at. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time, because I'll be covering every update on this one as it comes out. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Catch ya.